Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bondran, why did the Biden administration release Burkhoff?
Sir, Mr. Burkhoff was investigated by the U.S. Secret Service, not by the FBI. I don't know specifics. What I do know is that there was no swap or concession, and it's my understanding that his release...
We didn't get anything for it?
Sir, to the best of my knowledge, there were no swap or concessions.
Why do you think we did? I mean, you've said Russia, your statements today, formidable foe, foremost adversary, and the threat is current. Mr. Burkhoff has been described as an asset of supreme importance, one of the most connected, skilled, malicious hackers ever apprehended by U.S. authorities, and you don't know why we let him go?
No, sir, it's a Department of Justice question. The
But
FBI
you're the
doesn't have one.
director of cyber at the FBI in the Department of Justice. It's part of the Department of Justice, right?
Sir, yes, sir, it is, but obviously we're our own agency.
Now, look, I read your bio, and other than the degree from Michigan, it's pretty impressive. You've worked at FBI for like 20 years, right? You've held all kinds of positions. You're the director of cyber, and you can't tell me why we let the most notorious Russian hacker go, and you don't know what we got for it.
No, sir.
Were you consulted?
It's not an FBI investigation.
But you're the cyber man. Just Mr. Gates just talked about you're the key guy. You're the guy the administration sent here today to talk about cyber in light of the fact that last week President Biden said the threat from Russia is imminent. You've confirmed that today. You said it is current, is as we speak, and you can't answer if it was a good idea or not, whether you were consulted?
Sir, I don't actually, no, to your question, I was not consulted.
You're not consulted. Okay. You think it was a good idea?
Sir, I'm not in a position to comment on that.
The head of cyber is not in a position to comment. The guy in front of the Judiciary Committee at a time when the most formidable foe, our number one enemy when it comes to cyber attacks, with the threat that's imminent and current, can't answer whether it was a good idea or not, to release the most notorious Russian hacker we've ever caught.
Sir, it was a Department of Justice decision through the U.S. courts process, right? I would refer all the questions on Mr. Burkhoff.
Mr. Bondran, why'd you come? So far today, you've not been able to answer questions about Pegasus. We can't answer questions about sensitive investigative matters. Mr. Gates just went through the whole thing on Hunter Biden's laptop. You couldn't answer any questions about that. Can you answer questions about anything today? Can you answer questions about the school board situation, the spying on parents? You know anything about that?
But just to correct the record, sir, I actually did answer the questions to two representatives about NSO and Pegasus. To your point, I have not answered questions about the Hunter Biden laptop or about
Or the sensitive investigative matters?
I was just going to say that, if you let me finish, or about the sensitive investigative matter audit.
You know how many threat tags are on parents? How many of the threat tags that say EDU official have been assigned? How many cases now have that threat tag designation? You know anything about that? Sir,
No, all those questions should be referred to the Department of Justice.
Last week, Mr. Biden's speech, he said this. I mean, just to emphasize, I can't figure this out. He said, when he's talking to business leaders, the magnitude of Russia's cyber capacity is fairly consequential, and it's coming.
A major power of great consequence. It's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach. A real shooting war.
Private meetings.
Is increasing exponentially, the capabilities. We're in a battle between major power. It's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach of great consequence. It's increasing exponentially, the capabilities. Exponentially, the capabilities.
Private meetings.
The capabilities.
As we've talked about before, and as you've said as well, we'll help you, saying to the business leaders, we'll help you in any way to deal with cyber attacks. Do you think it helps the businesses who the president is asking to do everything you can to shore up your systems? Do you think it helps to release the most notorious Russian hacker we've ever apprehended?
Sir, I'm not going to answer any questions on Mr. Burkhoff's Secret Service case. As I said, the decision was made, through my understanding, through the ordinary course of action by the U.S. courts.
Well, you've agreed to give us briefings on other issues. Do you think there's someone at the FBI who can brief us on the Burkhoff situation?
Probably not, because it's not our case.
Do you think there's a chance Mr. Burkhoff's name was on the Hunter Biden laptop?
Sir, I have no idea.
No idea, and that says it all. That says it all, because we want someone in front of the committee, as Mr. Gates alluded to earlier. We want someone who can answer these questions about our constituents come up to me and talk to me about the school board situation. They come up and talk to me about the Hunter Biden laptop. They talk about all this. That they're concerned with the fact that we had an FBI that has abused the FISA process. Looks like they've abused the sensitive investigative matter process. We've sent letters on it not to get a response. And by the way, we did send a letter to the Biden administration on the Burkhoff situation, ask them to respond by 5 o'clock yesterday. Got no response from them. And then the guy we send today, or the guy who comes in front of the committee today, can't answer any questions about that either. Seems to me that'd be the most important question that we'd want the witness, Mr. Chairman, to be able to answer, is the whole, why did the United States of America let go Alexei Burkhoff? Why did we release him, put him on a plane back to Moscow when this is the biggest cyber threat we face is from Russia?
Because Vladimir Putin announced that they are personally sanctioning Joe Biden. Any bank accounts he has over there, he won't be able to access. And Donald Trump had this to say about that latest development. Breaking news, Russia just sanctioned Joe Biden. While that is a terrible thing in so many ways, perhaps it will now be explained why the Biden family received $3.5 million from the very wealthy former mayor of Moscow's wife. During our presidential debate, moderator Chris Wallace, then of Fox, would not let me ask that question. He said it was inappropriate. Remember that? Perhaps that's why Biden has been so slow on the draw with Russia. This is a really bad conflict of interest that will perhaps now be fully and finally revealed. First of all, remember that moment in the debate? Trump had some momentum. Hey, I wanted to know about the financial shenanigans of the Bidens. I think it could have been discussed, didn't you?
He didn't have a job until you became vice president. And once you
None of
became
that
vice
is
president,
true.
he made a fortune in Ukraine, in China, in Moscow,
That is simply
and various
not
other places.
true.
He
My
made
son,
a fortune.
my son,
and he didn't have a job.
My son, like a lot of people you know at home, had a drug problem. He's overtaken it. He's fixed it. He's worked on it, and I'm proud of him.
But why was he
I'm proud
given
of my
tens
son.
of millions
All
of
right, but he
dollars?
wasn't given
All right,
tens of
but
millions
he
of
was
dollars.
given
That is
tens of
totally,
millions of
that's
dollars.
totally
President Trump,
discredited.
We've already been
Totally discredited.
through this. I think the American people would rather hear about more substantial
So do I.
subjects. Well, you know, as a moderator, sir, I'm going to make a
I know, but when
judgment call
somebody
here.
gets $3.5 million
Okay,
from the
Let's
mayor
talk
of
about-
Moscow,
Let's talk
That
about
is not
think
true.
it's a
That
terrible thing.
report is totally
Why did he get
discredited.
it?
I
Mitt
think-
Romney on that committee said it wasn't worth taxpayers' money. That report. It was written for political reasons.
You know, I'd like to talk about climate change.
So would I.
Okay.
Climate change. Climate change. I'd like to know about Joe Biden's conflict of interest right now. Right now, that's important. Chris Wallace, shut it down. These numbers are accurate. That kind of money went from a Ukrainian company to the Bidens, and that kind of money went from the mayor of Moscow's wife that has not been refuted to the Bidens. This is a conflict of interest, and we should have known about it, heard more about it during the campaign, but you just saw how it was silenced. And by the way, that laptop, which is a roadmap to their corruption, has never been refuted, the authenticity of it, it's actually been validated, although he had no problem lying about it during the campaign.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plant. They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
And that's exactly what.
Is this
that's
where you're
exactly
going?
what.
This is where he's going. The laptop is Russia.
Gentlemen, I want to stay on the issue of race.
You
okay?
have to be kidding. Here
Mr.
we go again
President,
with Russia.
We're going to continue on the issue of race and climate change. Not about the laptop, not about Joe Biden's business dealings overseas. It's a valid issue. By the way, the computer, it's been verified, okay? It was Hunter. There's a major book by one of the best journalists in the country, Miranda Devine, Laptop from Hell. You can read it. I did. I highly recommend it. Everybody knows it now. I mean, everybody knows it. Take a look at this. When's the last time 62% of America agreed on anything? Putin would not have invaded if Trump were president. 62% of Americans believe that, and they're not wrong.
All of the emails, the horrible emails of the kind of money that you were raking in, you and your family. And Joe, you were vice president when some of this was happening, and it should have never happened. And I think you owe an explanation to the American people. Regardless of me, I think you have to clean it up and talk to the American people. Maybe you can do it right now.
Vice President Biden, you may respond. 30
Stay
seconds.
here.
And then I do want to follow up on the election security.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. I have not taken a single penny from any country whatsoever.
Whistleblowers describe President Biden as chairman of the board for these businesses. He personally participated in meetings and phone calls. Documents show that he was a partner with access to an office. To be clear, Joe Biden is the big guy. This evidence raises troubling questions about whether President Biden is a national security risk and about whether he is compromised by foreign governments. Despite the president's claim that he wasn't involved in Biden family business schemes, these photos show Joe Biden meeting with his family associates while vice president. Right there behind Paul. 4 different pictures. Committee Republicans have identified over 50 countries the Biden family sought businesses in. On the international side of the Biden family business, the deals were often led by Hunter Biden. And that map there behind Clay shows all the countries where the Bidens had a footprint in international business dealings. The investigation reveals a family that engaged with some of America's most powerful adversaries, planning to sell one of the largest sources of cobalt for electric vehicles in the world to the Chinese, for example. The Bidens flourished and became millionaires by simply offering access to the family. Among the dozens of shell companies the Bidens set up, there were millions of dollars of wire transfers, flights on Air Force Two to conduct personal business, and meetings with heads of state, all while Joe Biden was aware of what was happening. All the while, he turned a blind eye. Many transactions related to these businesses have raised red flags at U.S. banks. A suspicious activity report, or SAR, is a document a bank must file with the Treasury Department when a transaction is suspected to be related to money laundering or fraud or other types of criminal activity. According to media reports, the Biden family accumulated over 150 SARs. One SAR generated by an American bank to the Treasury Department connects Hunter Biden and his business associates to international human trafficking, among other illegal activities. The money that was being made from foreign principals in the same room as Joe Biden was increasingly spent on furthering illegal activity. The SARs show that Hunter Biden was conducting business with suspected human traffickers. The money gained through influence peddling was funneled to a suspected criminal enterprise, again, one linked to human trafficking. We have repeatedly called on the Biden Treasury Department to release additional financial documents to committee Republicans, but thus far Treasury has refused. We want to know what the Biden administration is trying to hide from the American people and why they are not being transparent. We also found evidence Hunter Biden sought to evade these SARs using his financial advisor, coincidentally a Clinton administration official. We will continue to pursue all evidence, and specifically the SARs and bank records in the new Congress. As part of our investigation, we have evidence that the finances, credit cards, and bank accounts of Hunter and Joe Biden were commingled, if not shared. And on some accounts, at least, red flags were raised by banks to the account owner or owners indicating suspicious or illegal activity. One of Hunter's closest associates, Eric Sherwin, was accessing Joe Biden's money and writing checks to reimburse Hunter. Sherwin arranged the Biden's international deals around the world. At the same time, he was a frequent visitor to the White House and Joe Biden during the Obama administration, visiting close to 30 times and sometimes with international business partners and Hunter, according to Hunter's calendar. Sherwin was also the president of Hunter's company and was appointed by President Obama to a position in the administration. After an apparent falling out with Sherwin, Hunter began coordinating business himself, and increasingly the deals brought in Joe Biden as a direct equity holder. One of these deals involves the sale of American natural gas to China. Evidence suggests Joe Biden had a 10% equity stake through his son.
Calls from Jim Biden. He was ready to call the Chinese directly and say the Biden family's pulling out of a deal, all well documented in text messages, WhatsApp, and emails.
And behind Glenn and Andrew is a map from Hunter's laptop. This was a PowerPoint presentation on his laptop in Chinese that they used in working with the Chinese. Now, let's think about this for a second. At a time when Americans are suffering from high energy prices because of this administration's terrible energy policy, we find evidence that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were involved in a scheme to try to get China to buy liquefied natural gas, and from a whistleblower to try to get their foot in the door with China starting to purchase an interest in natural gas drillers. Now, people are in outrage over China buying farmland in the Dakotas. What about China starting to buy into our American energy industry at a time when we have an energy crisis because of the bad policies of the Biden administration? Now, let that sink in. Hunter brought in millions of dollars from this deal from entities tied to the Chinese government. In emails obtained by committee Republicans, Hunter wanted keys made for Joe Biden and Jim Biden, his office mate. He provided Joe Biden's personal cell number and called him his partner. The other partners in that deal were two people closely tied to the Chinese Communist Party. And that's the, behind Andy and Jim, that's the email where Hunter sent to the landlord requesting keys, and the Chinese partners were on the email, and where he said, you know, Joe would need a key, and he even put Joe's cell phone number on there. Domestically, Jim Biden, Joe Biden's brother, used the Biden name to enrich himself in return for the promise that when Joe Biden became president in 2020, business partners would get rich by having access to a future Biden administration. By promising access to financing through Middle Eastern, Russian, and Chinese connections he made through Joe Biden, and by bringing his brother Joe Biden onto phone calls, Jim Biden was able to convince companies to give him loans of hundreds of thousands of dollars that he never repaid. The Biden administration has answered none of our requests for information regarding the Biden family or the financial transactions they engaged in. Instead, the Biden administration has spent over $250,000 to staff to, quote, deflect Hunter stories. Protecting the president's son who has committed crimes with Americans' tax dollars is a waste. The domestic and international scheme that promised access to wealth in a future Biden administration constitute fraud. And the president's participation in enriching his family is, in a word, abuse of the highest order. Rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse will be the primary goal of a Republican House Oversight Committee. As such, this investigation will be a top priority. We are releasing a report today that details what we have uncovered. We are also sending letters to the Biden administration officials and Biden family associates renewing our request for voluntary production of documents relevant to this investigation. This is an investigation of Joe Biden, the President of the United States, and why he lied to the American people about his knowledge and participation in his family's international business schemes. National security interests require the committee conduct investigation, and we will pursue all avenues that have long been ignored. Committee Republicans have uncovered evidence of federal crimes committed by and to the benefit of members of the president's family. These include conspiracy or defrauding the United States, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, violations of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The Biden family's business dealings implicate a wide range of criminality, from human trafficking to potential violations of the Constitution. In the 118th Congress, this committee will evaluate the status of Joe Biden's relationship with his family's foreign partners and whether he is a president who is compromised or swayed by foreign dollars and influence. I want to be clear. This is an investigation of Joe Biden, and that's where the committee will focus in this next Congress.
Notably this morning, we're not hearing that there is any news on Paul Whelan. And Paul Whelan is another American who has been wrongfully detained in Russia since 2018, going on 4 years in Russian prison. And so that is notable because U.S. officials have been saying for quite some time now that they were pushing for both Brittany Griner and Paul Whelan to be released. So, of course, today will be an incredibly joyful family for Brittany Griner's family, but we can expect it will be an incredibly emotional day for Paul Whelan's family.